Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I wanted to talk to you about how I use my library. So if you've been watching me for a while, you might know that I'm a pretty heavy library user. Last year, about 75% of the books that I read came from the library, and I am just so happy with using my library, but it didn't used to always be that way. I went through years and years and years of not using my library at all. And then just in the past few years, I've gotten really into it and I'm finding it just such a wonderful experience. So I thought I would kind of share that with you, talk about what my journey has been, and talk about really the ways that I use my library and what is really working for me and making it very low friction to get most of my books from the library. Just in case there's other people who are thinking, hey, maybe I'd like to use my library more too. So I'll go ahead and talk about my journey and my tips. So probably like many people, when I was a kid, I used my library quite a bit. My mom would take me to the library, I would use the library at my school, I would check out books. But when I became a teenager and then an adult, I really switched heavily to buying books. And for about a decade, all I did was buy books. I used my library not even once for probably over a decade. And I just mainly would wander around bookstores, pick up books that interested me, and add them to my collection. And my collection got pretty large, really, probably way too large, such that eventually I started having issues with having enough shelf space, especially when my husband and I kind of combined our books and then later moved and had to deal with packing up our books. It was just way too many things, and too many things that I had perhaps bought and not loved or never got around to reading, these sorts of things. And around that time I read Marie Kondo's book on the magic of tidying up, and I thought, you know what, I should probably get rid of some of these books that I don't like and also make room on my shelves and just reduce the number of shelves I have. So I kind of switched for a while to just buying ebooks, since that wouldn't sort of clutter up the shelves, and I didn't feel so bad about that. But even that, after a while, I started realizing I wasn't loving that I kept buying all these ebooks that I didn't get around to reading or I didn't really love. And around that time, I also started watching BookTube. And when I started watching BookTube, I found out about so many different books that sounded absolutely fascinating, but were totally outside of my comfort zone, and I had no idea if I would like them at all. So it felt a little bit intimidating to purchase something where I had zero idea if I was gonna like it. So I ended up starting to get books from my library, and one of the key things was that I discovered some of the different apps that my library has for checking out things online. When I read on my phone, that just reduces so many barriers for me to reading. It makes me read a lot more quickly. It is more convenient to read, more convenient to search and check out, and all these sorts of things. So I moved very heavily away from buying physical books and then away from buying ebooks to just borrowing ebooks, and then started to explore my library even further. And so now, 75% of what I read is from the library, and probably going forward, that number might get even a little bit higher as I continue to get rid of some of the old leftover physical and ebooks that I still have from years ago when I was buying more books. So now let me tell you about how I use my library, but first a little bit of a disclaimer. So my library is an amazing library. I live in the US, and my library happens to be one of the biggest library systems in the entire US and has just one of the best per capita spending on library patrons as well, which means that I have great access through my library, and not every library is going to have the same kind of access. However, a lot of libraries are going to have very similar services and very similar types of things as what my library does. So I'll talk through what I use at my library, and maybe your library will have something similar. You can explore it, look at their website, talk to a librarian, and figure out what you have access to. So one of the most important things for me when thinking about borrowing library books is the borrowing method, or the way that I get my books. So one of the things that is really life-changing for me is the Libby app. So Libby is an app that I have on my phone. I just downloaded it for my phone, and it connects to my library card. So my library syncs up with Libby, and I'm able to really do everything that I want to do through my phone. So I can search for books, I can tag them, I can check them out, I can read, I can highlight, I can, do all sorts of things through the Libby app for all of the ebook collection that my library has. So Libby is my primary vehicle for how I do my borrowing. And I found that even though I know a lot of people really like to hold a physical book in their hands, reading on my phone is just so perfect for me because often I have like wrist problems and it's much easier to hold a phone than it is to hold a book. And I really like to read in bed, and it's just so much easier to hold a phone than it is to hold a physical book. I have tried e-readers before, but having a separate device for that I found was just not working for me, especially because I'll often read on my phone when, well, in the previous days, when I was out and about and waiting for things, that sort of thing. So I really, really like reading on my phone, and it has helped a lot. Libby itself, I've just had such a great experience with. It's very, very easy to search for whatever you're looking for and to filter. So if you want to filter by like audiobooks versus physical books or by genre, anything like that, you can definitely do that. I use the tags pretty extensively. I have so many different tags based on whatever my interests are. So whenever I hear about a book, I add it to my Libby app through a tag for whatever tags I really kind of want to pay attention to, and that's how I prioritize my reading a little bit. I know a lot of people will do things like add a book that they want to read to Goodreads, but I like to do it through Libby because really I want to pay attention to the books that I can check out rather than just books in general. And I just love reading on the app itself. I do tons of highlighting and note-taking and things like that on the app, and I just really like the reading experience. Plus, if I return a book and then re-borrow it out, it'll save my place, it'll save all of my notes, and so that's really great because I'm kind of horrible at finishing books very quickly, and I often have to pause them and come back to them later. So I just love reading on Libby. I love checking things out and returning them. You actually can check things out and then read them on like a Kindle e-reader as well through Libby, but I don't really do that because the Libby app is just so good in and of itself. Another app that my library has that I don't use as much, but every once in a while I will use, is Hoopla. And the real benefit of Hoopla, at least the way that my library has kind of set it up, is that there are no wait lists. So whereas on Libby, probably the biggest downside is that lots and lots of people want to read ebooks, and so the wait list is sometimes very long for new releases. On Hoopla, there is no wait. So for my library, I can check out 10 things immediately. I don't have to wait at all, but the limit is 10 per month. Hoopla also has a very different catalog of what's available. So it tends to have comics and music and movies. So I often go to Hoopla if there is a comic that I want to read because of the immediate access. But other than that, I find that the library kind of catalog for Hoopla at my library is a little smaller than I want, but maybe that's also because I'm not as into more traditional like DC Marvel type comics, and I'm often looking more like for graphic novels or manga, which it doesn't seem to have as big a collection of at my library. But it is pretty neat if you want to explore another app. Check out definitely what your library has, if they have Libby, if they have Hoopla, if they have other things. I know that there's multiple apps out there, and it just depends on how your library has it set up. And then the last sort of borrowing method that I have is physical books. Obviously, libraries are great for physical books. I very, very frequently will go and look at my library's physical books in terms of getting something that Libby doesn't have, or also just trying to get something that maybe has a huge wait list on Libby. On Libby, I am limited to 25 holds at a time, whereas with the physical books, I can put 50 holds at a time, and the borrowing period is longer at my library. We have a 4-week borrowing period for physical versus a 3-week borrowing for ebooks. So physical books are often my go-to for new releases because it's just a little bit easier to get access to, or kind of rarer things, sometimes older books or things that are just not very commonly read, I can often find in physical form at my library, even if I can't find it on Libby. And the nice thing about my physical library is now that I have been using it more frequently, I've just set up a routine. So every Saturday morning, I just go on a trip to the library, return books and pick up books, and I manage all of my holds and everything like that through their website. So it's really, really easy for me to just put a hold on something and things will come in and be set aside for me, and I can just go pick them up every Saturday morning. So now I want to talk a little bit about the way that I manage my holds, because I put holds on a lot of stuff, and I found a couple of methods for managing that so that I can access the books when it's more convenient for me. So the first of these is pausing. I pause my holds extensively. I often will put a hold on things and immediately pause them so that I don't get books when I'm not expecting them. Often I have so many things on hold that if I don't manage them through pausing, I will get too many books coming in and I won't be able to read them. So what I'll do often is pause things for like 6 months and let myself move forward in the line. My library at least allows me to keep my place in line as long as I'm paused on my hold, which means I can move up to the front of the line, and then whenever I'm ready for the book, I can just unpause, and within a few days to a week or two, that book will then be ready for me and I'll get it right around when I want it. So pausing is something I use extensively and is just really, really helpful, especially because I put so many new releases on hold, and then those tend to have such bad, long wait lists that it's really, really helpful. The only thing is that sometimes I do run out of spaces in my holds list because I am limited in the total number of holds I can do. But other than that, it works really, really well. And then as far as managing my loans themselves, I use renewing quite frequently. My library allows me to renew ebooks as long as nobody else is in line for it. So for things that are less common, that's really nice. I definitely have books that I have renewed many, many, many times in a row because I'm taking a long time to get through them. And for physical books, I'm able to renew up to 5 times in a row as long as nobody else is waiting. And there are definitely books that I have renewed so many times before finally getting to them. I always love it when there's no wait list on a book because then I can take my time and get to it when I'm ready to. In addition to those methods of sort of handling my holds and my loans, I also have a couple of approaches to getting books that my library doesn't have in its catalog. So the first is requesting a purchase. I request purchases all the time at my library. My library has pretty generous rules about this. I can request up to 15 books a month that they purchase, and as long as they follow 3 rules at my library, they generally will purchase them for me. So the first is it has to be published in the US, it has to be published in the last 2 years, and it has to have a good professionally reviewed source. So it can't just be something that nobody has ever heard of in the library community or is poorly reviewed. And as long as it fits those, they basically buy me everything that I request. And I request quite a lot of very niche and strange books, and they've bought me all of them that fit those 3 rules. Sometimes I request things and don't realize that it's not published in the US or those sorts of things, but as long as it is, they have basically gotten me everything. I use this all the time. I especially use this for new releases. It is such a great way to request new releases because that also puts me at the front of the line, and it's just a really great way to do. Although my library does take a month or 2 after a book is released to kind of process it and get it into the system. So it's not like I'm getting a book on release date, but still, I'm at the front of the line, and I find that really, really helpful. The other method I use for getting a book that my library doesn't have in its catalog is Interlibrary Loan. So in the US at least, the libraries have this whole system of Interlibrary Loan where libraries can contact other libraries and ask them for books for their patrons, and they can get it for a short loan period. This is really helpful if I want a book that doesn't fit the criteria that my library has for requesting a purchase, but I really want to get my hands on things. I don't use this that frequently, but I've had really, really good luck when I have. Even things that are very hard to get a hold of. I remember that I asked my library to get me The Sum of Our Follies by Shih-Li Kow, which is published by a small press in Malaysia, and my library tried really hard. Apparently there's only a few copies of it in the entire US, and they kept trying, and they emailed me and they said, hey, you know, there's only a few places and currently they're all in use. Do you want us to try again? These sorts of things. And they finally got me the copy, and I absolutely loved that book. So I was really impressed by just kind of the effort that they put into in terms of getting me an interlibrary loan. So this is a really good resource for me as well for those kind of more obscure books. Okay, so that's basically my journey of beginning to use the library and sort of the way that I use my library. There's definitely a ton of other things that libraries have that I haven't even touched on. I know that a lot of libraries do plenty of other things too, a lot of different services, even things like jigsaw puzzle checkouts, all sorts of different things. So definitely this is not the end all be all, but this is just how I use my library. And I think that if you are interested in trying to use your library more, I really recommend giving it a try and trying to figure out kind of what services your library offers and which of them works for you, because until you kind of try them, you may not know if it works or not. And I think that it's just so great when you find a way to use your library that works for you. For me, my reading has increased so much, and I think that a huge part of that is because of my library usage. Before I joined BookTube and before I started using my library, I was reading maybe 25 books a year, and now I'm at more like 200 a year. And a big part of that is because I don't have to buy my books. I don't have to worry, you know, am I gonna like this book before I pick something up? I just request it at my library and I get it and I try it, and if I love it, wonderful. And if I don't, I just DNF. I DNF extensively. I DNF about 20% of what I pick up, which I don't know if I would do if I was purchasing my books, because there would be that kind of guilt of not finishing something that you bought. But with the library, there's none of that guilt, and it's so easy to get so many different books, and it's just always at my fingertips with my Libby app. So really, the library has greatly increased the amount that I use my library, the way that I read, all of these sorts of things. It's wonderful. So anyway, that is my library journey, how I use my library. I hope that that has been helpful for you guys. If you use your library in other ways that I don't and you want to share that with me, go ahead. I'd love to hear about sort of your library journey, or if you're interested in using your library, I'd love to hear kind of what your thoughts are. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer. Yeah, so just leave me a comment down below. I would love to chat with you.